It was preseason for presidential hopefuls in Washington this weekend. Some of the leading voices of the Republican Party gathered at the annual Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC as it's called, and at least a few of the speakers are expected to make a run for the White House. The group includes former governors Mitt Romney and Tim Pawlenty, ex-House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, and even Donald Trump. So far, only one Republican, business executive Herman Cain, has officially announced a bid for the White House. And for a closer look at who might be in this crowded field, we are joined by CBSNews.com political reporter Brian Montopoli. Thanks for being with us.
Of course. All
right, so at this CPAC event here, one of the biggest names in the Conservative Party, Sarah Palin, was not there. What are her chances?
I think Sarah Palin's star has faded a little. There was a poll out of New Hampshire yesterday that had her at 50% disapproval among Republican primary voters. People always say about Sarah Palin, this is someone who can't win a general election. But frankly, I'm not sure she can even get through a primary. She has become this very divisive figure, even among Republicans. And obviously, no one can predict what Sarah Palin's going to do. And I think Palin is seriously considering a run. But the numbers don't look great for her. And if I were her advisors, I may start cautioning her that she would have a lot of work to do to overcome the doubts even among Republicans about her viability as a candidate.
Well, when it comes to a possible candidate with some broad support, would Mitt Romney be that person so far?
It's such a wide open field, but if you had to pick someone at this point, you'd have to pick Mitt Romney. I mean, Romney came close in 2008 cycle. If he'd won Florida, he probably would have been the nominee. He looks presidential. I think he's overcome a lot of the concerns that some Republicans had about his record as Massachusetts governor. Romney's problem is that he passed, as Massachusetts governor, a law that is called Romney Care by its detractors, that is just like what the detractors of the health care law, which they call Obamacare, it's a very similar law. And so you've got a Republican primary field where everyone hates this health care bill, or health care law. They're all complaining about the health care law. Romney passed a very similar law. That's going to be very hard for him to explain in a Republican primary field.
Well, another name that we saw in 2008, Mike Huckabee, could he be a strong contender in the early stages at least?
Absolutely. Huckabee won Iowa in 2008. Social conservatives love the guy because he's a real social conservative, but he doesn't come off as sort of mean. People really, he's a likable guy. The problem for Huckabee is he's going to have a hard time raising money. I mean, Huckabee has always sort of been outside of the traditional GOP fundraising world, and that was a problem for him in 2008, and so it would be hard for him to have staying power. Plus, he's got a nice perch on Fox News right now doing his nightly show. But if Huckabee jumps in, I think there's a real good chance he wins Iowa.
Well, what about Newt Gingrich jumping in? Because it seems like that's where he's headed, but he's kind of been out of the public eye for, what, about a decade now?
Yeah, well, you know, he hasn't really gone away. I mean, he's been giving speeches, he's been sort of staying very active, and he's seen as this idea man in the party. Gingrich, part of the problem is he's not a fresh face. I mean, Republicans are really looking forward right now, and Gingrich is the opposite of a fresh face. I mean, he was on the cover of Time magazine more than 10 years ago. The other problem for Gingrich is, you know, I think he might have a hard time with social conservatives because his personal life, you know, he's been married multiple times, and that's the kind of stuff that starts to come up in the nastiness of a presidential campaign.
What about Michelle Bachmann? And let's talk about some females that could possibly make a run for it.
Well, unfortunately, that's not a real long list. It's Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann, at least at this point. Michelle Bachmann, the Tea Party loves her, absolutely, and she is a strong fundraiser. The problem for Bachmann is she's very far right, and even for a Republican electorate, I think she might be seen as a little bit too far right. Her performance after the State of the Union, where she gave the Tea Party response, was widely mocked on Saturday Night Live for her not looking at the camera. Right. And I just think she has some issues with sort of people taking her seriously as a candidate. Well,
let's go through a list of some of the people that viewers may not be that familiar with, but that could possibly make a run for it. First up, Tim Pawlenty.
Tim Pawlenty, he's been doing all the right things. He's a lot like what Romney was like in 2008. Pawlenty's problem is he just doesn't excite anyone that much. He's really working to overcome this notion that he's sort of a bland candidate. That's not to say he can't do it, but that's sort of what's holding him back right now.
All right, Mitch Daniels.
Mitch Daniels, sort of the anti-Obama, real low-key, Indiana governor, great record. One problem he has is he called for a truce on social issues, really angering some of the social conservatives that are still a big part of the Republican Party. So that's going to be a problem for him in an early state like Iowa, where there are a ton of social conservatives.
Let's talk the strengths and weaknesses of Jon Huntsman, for example.
I think Huntsman's a real strong candidate. He's served in the Obama administration, which is a problem to some extent, as ambassador to China. He's leaving his job for that reason. And he is got great business experience, great on foreign policy and on China, which obviously is a major country for the United States right now. But, you know, he did work in the Obama administration, and he's a moderate on a lot of issues, on gay rights, on immigration. And, you know, in a Republican primary, that's not exactly where the party is.
What about Jon Thune?
Jon Thune certainly looks like a president. He's got a lot of strengths. He's a tough campaigner. He can raise money. People don't know who he is that much yet, which is a little bit of a problem. And more problematic in a Republican primary is he supported TARP, the bank bailout. The Tea Party, a lot of people on the right see support for TARP as a disqualifier. They consider that sort of the original sin. Yeah, absolutely. So he's going to have to overcome the TARP issue.
All right. Well, another person who made some waves at CPAC was Donald Trump, possibly running. But he also had some really interesting things to say. Let's take a listen to that.
The United States has become a whipping post for the rest of the world. If I run and if I win, this country will be respected again. By the way, Ron Paul cannot get elected, I'm sorry to tell you.
So we heard a few boos there in the crowd, even though Trump obviously seemed very confident with himself and his ideas for a possible run. Is this just political theater, or is this something that we should really be looking at?
It's political theater. It's great theater, and I don't necessarily disagree with him about Ron Paul, who has a narrow base, even though he won the CPAC straw poll. But you know, Donald Trump is very good at publicity, and this was a great publicity stunt for him. And who knows, he may get into the race. But the fact is, he doesn't have staff. He doesn't have the fundraising network. I mean, he doesn't really have any clear policy positions at this point. So while it was an entertaining moment at the conference, I'm not sure that we should be taking him too seriously as a candidate.
It is early in the game here, but if there was someone that may be a surprise candidate, who would you say that is?
A surprise candidate. I mean, this year is so different than 2008. At this time in the cycle, we had all sorts of candidates in. You know, Hillary Clinton was in, Barack Obama was in, lots of Republicans were in. Everyone's holding back this year. No one really knows. They're a little concerned about Obama, I think, and he's showing a little bit of strength, and they don't want to run a losing campaign. I hesitate to venture a guess.
Really? Okay.
There's a lot of people that are looking at it, and everyone's sort of sitting back to see how the field shakes out. I mean, if no strong social conservatives get in, right? Sarah Palin stays out, Michelle Bachmann stays out. You know, Huckabee stays out. Maybe a social conservative, somebody that we haven't been talking about, but who's well respected, maybe has a talk show, or even a preacher or someone, could get in and really make waves. So there's a lot of people that are looking at this that no one's talking about yet. It is early, so we're going to have to see.
All right. The field is still wide open, according to you.
Absolutely.
All right. Brian Montopoli, thanks for being with us. We always appreciate your